tend to see it as raw as this.
Good evening and welcome.
And welcome, everybody, to the afternoon session. I hope you've had a chance to rest up over what was, I hope, a very nice weekend with friends, family, those you love, and got past the whole turkey event, and now you're getting ready to get down to business here. I'm Michael Bryan, and this is the afternoon session. So let's get busy. We got a brand new trial for you out of New Hampshire. This is the case against William Arbery. He is accused of strangling his wife, Maureen. Prosecution says he did it. They don't say he had one reason. They say he had about 400,000 reasons. That was the value of the life insurance policy on his wife. Seems, according to the prosecution, he's got a little gambling issue, and in fact was apprehended after the crime, gambling. So we'll get into that case. It is live again in New Hampshire. It is a life without the possibility of parole penalty in that case if the conviction sticks. Charges of first and second degree murder. Also, you may have heard about this little thing going on in U.S. federal court. Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's right hand. Well, she is in court today as opening statements began. They finalized the jury this morning, got into opening statements. There are 4 Jane Doe victims, all saying that they were groomed and solicited and procured, as it were, for Jeffrey Epstein to take care of his sexual needs. And there are a ton of Mann Act violations there, as we all know, the transport of others across state lines for immoral purposes. So grooming going to be huge in this case. Cameras not in the courtroom. It is federal, so rats on that. But we do have our own guy out there on the field, in the field, and we will check in to get details on that case as it continues to unfold. Finally, last week, before you took off for Thanksgiving, we were wrapping up the case in Brunswick, Georgia. The case against Gregory McMichael's, Travis McMichael, also William Bryan, all convicted in the death of Ahmaud Arbery. The 25-year-old seen running through the Sotila Shores neighborhood was captured, as it were, by the defendants and ultimately killed. So they came back with that verdict after 2 days, a total of about 11 hours. And I think there were 27 verdicts to be released, and I believe it was 9 for 9 as to Travis McMichael's, no malice murder as to Gregory McMichael's, and then about 3 of the 9 against William Bryan were found not guilty. The others were all guilty, and they're looking now at sentencing coming up in the next couple of weeks. Life without the possibility of parole, felony murder, huge in that case. So let's take a look now at what Travis McMichael. Remember, he took the stand, and his attorney had a closing argument that incorporated what this jury learned from his own client. So let's listen to some of that and have a guest for us on the other side.
Travis had spent 9 years in the Coast Guard, search and rescue, policing the water, sometimes 200 feet offshore, going into situations that were very difficult, working with law enforcement, reaching out and extending his hand as firefighter, law enforcement officer combination. For the first time in his life, Travis is now in those waters. He is now the one who needs help. Our goal here has been to do everything we can to dive into those waters, to search for the truth, to pull it from the icy depths and to raise it to the surface. And we have done that. We have done that with Travis McMichael. We have carried him to the surface to you. And now the choice is yours. Will you do as he has done in the past to others? Will you reach out your hand and extend it to Travis McMichael and pull him out of those waters? I think if you've heard anything that I've said, there's only one decision. He is not guilty on all charges. I thank you all for your attention.
So that is Jason Sheffield. He is the attorney for Travis McMichael's. That was part of his closing argument. Very kind of visual narrative about how the jury needed to kind of reach out and help his guy. Well, here to talk about the case and the closing argument is the man himself. Jason Sheffield is here. Jason, thank you for joining. First of all, I appreciate that. You know, the last time we spoke, we were on the courthouse steps, and by the way, you found the only place to get courthouse Wi-Fi outside the building. So I appreciate that. So we were talking at about maybe 2-3 hours before the verdict, and just after the jury had requested to see the video over again. And we were talking about the area in which they were focusing on, which was the conflict, the interaction between your client, Travis McMichael, and the victim, Ahmaud Arbery. And you thought, correct me if I'm wrong, you thought that was not necessarily a bad sign, that maybe if the self-defense argument was going to work, that's where they needed to focus. What are your thoughts?
I did. I thought it was a good sign because it meant that perhaps they had already decided that the rest of Travis's actions for the 4.5 minutes preceding that moment were in fact pursuant to lawful citizen's arrest. So if they had made it that far and were now looking at the video to determine whether or not this was self-defense at the very end of this encounter, we felt firmly positive in our belief that the video showed self-defense by Travis, because you could very clearly see Ahmaud Arbery not turning to run away, but turning that dramatic left turn across the front of the truck and traveling all the way across the front of the truck to meet Travis at the other side, which we felt clearly indicated that this was an attack, that Ahmaud Arbery was the primary aggressor at that moment, and that Travis had no choice. And so when they made that request, we felt like they're going to come back with a not guilty.
Obviously, that is not what happened, and we may never know the details of their thought process. Perhaps it was to convince 1, 2, 3 people that, see, it really wasn't self-defense. Obviously, now in retrospect, knowing the verdict, it wasn't as positive as you had hoped. Let me ask you this, because everybody was very interested in how we got to Travis taking the stand. So with what you can share, was that something you began discussing with him from the very beginning? How did that all unfold?
The first moment that we saw Travis there in a jail cell, right after he had been arrested and we took on his representation, he was adamant that he needed to explain himself. Fortunately, we felt the same way, because in a case such as this, where you have taken another man's life, and you've done so because you believe that you yourself were about to die, you have to explain that fear. You have to explain that thinking to the jury. And so instantly we were connected on the idea that Travis was going to testify. It was our call that he testify first, and that he do so prior to any other witness testifying on his behalf, because we did not want the jury to think or feel that he had the benefit of other witnesses testifying about him or about his experiences or about the neighborhood, so that the jury might think that he had heard all that testimony and could incorporate it into his own. We felt that it would be the right thing for him to step up first.
So let's take a look at some of that testimony from the trial here, Jason, and we'll talk on the other side.
Sure.
And all he had done so far is run away from you, right?
He has ran past me and ran away, and I let him run away, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
But at this time, you're not letting him run away. You're pointing a shotgun at him, correct?
I am not letting him run to me, directly to me.
And he doesn't. He runs around there, right?
He did.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you, Jason, how do you think your client did on cross? Always difficult. You can't plan for everything.
Travis did exactly as I thought he would do. Travis has been forthcoming. He's been open. He's been honest about his experience from the moment he talked to police on the scene to the moment he was taken down to headquarters for his statement. His testimony was just a continuation of that same open and honest assessment of what he did and why he had to do it that day. I thought he did a great job.
So let me ask you this. It's a broader question, maybe a little more difficult question. Does this whole scenario play out the same way if Ahmaud Arbery is not black?
I think it does. I think Travis and his dad certainly demonstrated that their goal in the neighborhood was to try to protect themselves and their neighbors from crime. And there were other experiences where they had done as they did with Mr. Arbery, where they had gone out, where they had taken firearms with them, where they had sought to understand why the person was there or what they were doing in the neighborhood or whether they were connected to criminal activity, and they called the police. I think the problem is that they act first and call second. And I don't think the jury liked that. I think that it fed into the state's narrative that these two men were vigilantes, that they were there to be law enforcement officers first and then bring in the real police second.
Let's take a look now, a little more of your handiwork here, Jason. This is Travis on direct examination.
Do you remember where your bodies were moving?
I know that he was, I didn't know where I was at, but I knew that he was on me. I knew that I was losing this. I knew that if I was getting tripped, if I would have tripped, or if he would have got a lucky strike on my head, or if I would have lost that grip on that shotgun, that I would have been shot, or I'd have been in serious trouble at that point. I knew that he was overpowering me, but I didn't know which direction or what mechanics he was doing to overpower me.
Do you, at that time, did you remember how many times you shot the gun?
No, I didn't. I thought I shot twice.
But you shot it. You shot it.
Yes. Yes.
Do you like I said, do you remember how many times you did?
I thought it was twice until later on, speaking with the investigator, that I realized that it was 3 shots. But I shot the first shot. I knew I shot, and then the second shot, I shot again because I was still fighting. He was all over me. He was still all over that shotgun, and he was not relenting. So I shot again to stop him. I don't know where I was going. My dad came out, and he was yelling that he's got his hand under him. I turned around. We got over there and pulled his hand out from under him and realized that he was deceased. And I looked up, and the police were right there.
Jason, as I watch that, I see Travis McMichael on the stand, and I see his dad watching. I can't imagine that dynamic. How did that play out as you were preparing for it and during the trial?
There were moments where you could see Greg McMichael emotional. There were moments where you could hear him breathing heavily, feel what his son was having to bear the brunt of, for lack of a better word, because of just the very nature of what happened. The fact that this father said to his son, "Let's go, grab your gun. He's back. Let's go get him." The fact that then the son responds to his father's instruction and heads out the door to go and do, this investigation. The fact that the father is telling the son, "Go this way," and the son is having to say, "No, I'm not going to go this way." I think at the culmination of Travis's testimony, Greg McMichael got to see the impact that this had on not only himself, but his son. And I think there was a lot of sadness for Greg McMichael to see his son on this world stage having to explain their actions on that day. And it hit him hard.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then they go right into Thanksgiving, and now sentencing looms. And not the father-son experience anybody wants. Couple more questions. I want to kick you loose. I appreciate your time. I've got to ask you about something. I've tried a few cases, heard and seen and reported hundreds more. I've never heard one phrase so repeated, good, bad, or otherwise, than the phrase used by Laura Hogue when she mentioned Ahmaud Arbery's dirty toenails. Can you give me, did you know that was coming? What was the reaction from the defense team other than the husband and wife Hogues?
Yeah, the comment about the toenails was something that we had discussed after we got the medical examiner's report. And when we spoke to the medical examiner about Ahmaud Arbery's body and the condition of his body, the medical examiner kind of raised the issue in the report by noting those toenails being long and dirty. And when we asked the relevance of that and why he would put something like that in his report, he gave a couple of reasons. One, just the observations, but also that could be a sign of mental illness or the person's inability to do basic care for themselves. Of course, that idea that Ahmaud Arbery had a mental illness was nothing new to our case. We absolutely knew that he did have one, but the judge was preventing it from evidence. So, to the extent that it was a piece of evidence that not only stood for his mental illness issues, but also that it appeared to be something that would, in some way, perhaps prohibit him from being a runner or a jogger in a way that might impede his ability to do it. Obviously, there are a lot of people that disagree about that, but we felt it was more of a sign of mental illness than anything. The way that Laura talked about it, the way that she brought it up, I felt was in context with her argument about mental illness or not being the same young man that he had been back in 2012. The nation saw it differently and saw it as a racist trope. I'm here to tell you, there is not a racist bone in Laura Hogue's body. That is not how she meant it. But as typical, the public grabbed it up and fit it into their narrative, and it could not be further from the truth. It was never designed as a way to impact this jury or to cause this jury to see Mr. Arbery as a runaway slave or as a dirty, disgusting human being who wasn't worthy of life. Nothing could be further from the truth.
I know that even Reverend Al Sharpton latched onto that and flamed that inferno even further. Okay, one question before you go, and this is procedural. I'm assuming there will be an appeal. Are you going to be involved? What's the status?
I don't know that we'll be involved in the appeal, but there certainly will be one. The issues that will be raised are the ones that the judge essentially heard pre-trial, but ruled against the defense. So anytime the judge rules against the defense, then that can become an issue for appeal. Those issues are well preserved in the record as they exist, and I certainly could preside over that appeal as the defense attorney. However, there's also the issue of venue. There's also the issue of whether or not we, the trial attorneys, made mistakes in the course of this trial, and we cannot raise those against ourselves. Those are called ineffective assistance of counsel, as you know, and those must be raised by a separate, distinct lawyer. So if ineffective assistance plays into the appeal, we will not be involved.
Yeah, and very often that's thrown in. That's part of the mix, right? So let me ask you this. The single strongest appellate issue in your client's case?
Two things. It's going to be Arbery's mental illness, and it's going to be the jury charge given by the judge on citizen's arrest.
Very good. Jason Sheffield, I appreciate the time. It was a pleasure to get to know you a little bit. Keep fighting the good fight, sir, and I hope to see you again here on the network, if not out in the field. Have a great day.
Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate you all.
You bet. Okay, guys, let's take a quick break. We do have a live trial underway in New Hampshire and other goodies, so stay where you are. We'll come right back to Law&Crime.